And welcome finally. My apologies. I think it's funny that, or ironic, I guess, we are talking about conflict resolution and I had to resolve the conflict between myself and my computer. My apologies for being late. I was having a lot of technical issues. Neither one of my browsers wanted to work. So here I am finally. I apologize to those that were probably waiting for me and aren't here now because of that. Because who wants to hang around for 15, 20 minutes waiting for uh, something to happen that's not? But you know what? I roll with the punches. It's been the way life has been. You got to be able to roll with the changes, and that's all part of our conflict resolution. You can get upset about things, or you could try to resolve them amicably and come out better in the long run. So here we go. Today is part two of our conflict resolution training session. And today we are going to do a quick review of what we discussed last week. And then we're going to get more into the types and styles of conflict resolution and go from there. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have at any time during this video. So, our learning outcomes. Last week we talked about communication. What are the top 10 communication skills and how does your body language affect communication? Both very important when you're trying to resolve conflicts. Today we are, of course, talking about conflict resolution. What are the 5 types of conflict resolution and how to resolve conflicts? We'll see if we did that. It was probably after midnight when I finished this. All right, so let's do a review of communication skills. Our top 10 communication skills, listening. It's very important. One of the main things of conflict is the fact that people start yelling and raising their voice because they don't feel like they're being listened to. And how can you sit and have a disagreement with someone if you aren't actively listening to that person? Our nonverbal language says just as much as our verbal language does. Talked about body language and how you stand or what your facial expression does, eye contact, hand gestures, even the tone of your voice all displays nonverbal, and that could again play into how the conflict goes. Clarity and concision. You want to be able to clearly and concisely state your argument or your feelings or your statement or your half of the story as clearly and concisely as possible. Friendliness, sometimes just having a nice tone or a smile is enough to put somebody who's angry at ease and help ease into a conversation with somebody during a conflict. Confidence, you have to be able to confidently get your message across. One thing, if somebody's coming at you aggressively, if you flake in front of them, they're just going to steamroll over you. And how are you going to get your feelings explained to this other person if you don't stand up for yourself, if you're not confident enough to talk about your issues? Empathy, understanding where your coworkers are coming from while listening to them, respecting their opinions. You don't have to agree with them, but you do have to respect them. Open-mindedness, you got to be flexible and you got to have an open mind, especially when you're listening. Just try to keep in mind that this is, when you're listening to someone, these are what that person, that's their feelings and that's their concerns. Again, you don't have to agree with them, but you do have to be open enough to listen to them. Respect. You can't get anywhere around here without having respect for other people. It's one thing to sit and demand respect for yourself, that people have to respect you, but if you're not putting that foot forward first and showing respect and demonstrating respect to other people, even outside of conflict, then it's just going to go downhill from there. Feedback. You have to be open to get feedback from others. That's one way that I thrive and learn, is that I'm getting feedback from other people. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? How can I get better? Where do I need to go next to move up? These are all things. How did I handle that situation? Is there a better way I could have handled that situation? And then you want to pick the correct medium, face to face, phone call, emails, texts. You got to know how the person that you want to communicate with, what their best and preferred method of communication is. All right, facial expressions. We talked a lot about facial expressions. And, just remember your face says more about what you are saying than what you are actually saying. Again, you can have your eyebrows furrowed and kind of a mean grimace and try to smile. It's going to make you look kind of evil. But, you really have to make sure that your facial expressions are matching your tone and the words you're saying and the actions that you're doing. So just really be careful of your facial expressions. Reading nonverbal body language, you can tell a lot about a person by the way that their body is acting. Are they open? Are they interested? Are they being defensive? Are they being hostile? Are they even paying attention? Are they hiding are they hiding something about what they're feeling? Do they stand in a menacing way? Are they open? Are they standing in a neutral way? There's a lot that you can do to sit and read what the other person is saying without them actually saying anything. The power pose. Remember me last week talking about how animals out in the wild will fluff up their stature and make themselves seem more larger than life to assert dominance over other people. And there's times and places when you want to have a high power pose versus a low power pose. A lot of times people are being aggressive, they're in a high power pose. Or if you want to stop aggression, you need to switch from a low power pose to a high power. You want to be able to turn it off and on. If you want to sit and compassionately and empathetically, I know big words, listen to somebody and hear their view and their emotions, you don't want to have a high power pose when you're listening to them, because that's going to make them nervous, especially if they're more passive. It's going to scare them. It's going to intimidate them. So you want to be able to adapt to a low power pose that kind of makes you seem more humble and more open to what they have to say. So, there's a lot of different ways to which you want to do, which pose best describes you and which one do you prefer to use in which situation. And beware of body language pitfalls. There's some things that habits are hard to break, and we need to be very cognizant of what those are so we can be aware when we're doing them, and we can try to discourage our body from doing it as best we can. Do we fidget too much? Do we play with our hair? The defensive pose, the shuffling, our feet, forgetting the smile, appearing distracted, slouching, non-existent, where you're kind of staring away, or if you're glowering at the person, your eye contact, or mismatching verbal and nonverbal communications. Those are all pitfalls that the body language will betray to other people. So we have to be aware of what our body's doing when we're having a conversation, especially if there's conflict going on. Now we get into the meat of it, conflict resolution. Am I going too fast for you? I feel like I started 15 minutes late, so I gotta talk really fast to get through it all, but I will slow it down here. What is conflict? Conflict is defined as a clash between individuals arising out of a difference in thoughts, attitudes, understanding, interest, requirements of a task, and sometimes it is just a perception difference. I'll tell you what, more times than not, it is all just about perception. Somebody may say something and they may be joking, but you're going to perceive it as something completely different. And that's one thing that we see a lot here at Working Community Services, is that one individual, you know who you are, will say something in a joking manner, but their tone and their nonverbal body language um, makes it seem meaner than what it really is. And the other individual, you know who you are, will react to it thinking that this person is trying to diminish them, degrade them, make fun of them when they were just trying to have a good time. You know, there's times and places for those, and when we're at work, we need to be more professional. You know, one person's joke, you know, you don't control how that other person is going to take that. Everybody is in charge of their own emotions, and it's all about perception. If you perceive it differently than how the person meant it, you know, the person who said it, you know, that's on them for not being more respectful of how it could be perceived by the other person. So, what are the different types of conflict a person can have? Well, some of the things that we see around here are like task conflict. You know, when there are differences on how to complete a task, not wanting to work on the task, or someone getting in the way of them completing the task. You may come into work one day and not feel like working, and by somebody coming up and asking you to work will set you off. We've seen that, you know, and it's okay if you come in to the workshop and you're feeling a certain way, and you know, at that time you feel that that is enough to warrant you not working. Instead of talking about it, you react differently. You get more hostile. Um, or, you know, say someone's getting in the way of you completing a task. We've seen people get upset by others just jumping in to help them. Well, they didn't ask for the help, you know, and that's understandable, but there's different ways that we can handle that conflict. Relationship conflict. You know, it arises from differences in personality, style, tastes, friendships, and favorite staff. We see all this stuff around here. It's such a rainbow of conflict and personalities, and you know, it's what makes us unique and what we do and how we interact with everybody. But you know, when you're interacting with your peers at work, you got to be able to recognize their personality and their style and their taste, and respect, you know, boundaries of friendships. And you know, working with your favorite staff, you might not always get to work with your favorite staff. You may have to work with someone else that day. You know, does that really warrant getting into a conflict over? Is this person jumping in to help you when it's getting close to transportation time? Is that really worth getting in a fight over? These are the relationships that we try to work on becoming more healthy. And a value conflict, you know, are differences in identity and value, including politics, religion, ethics, and other deeply held beliefs. No two things will start a conflict quicker than discussing politics and religion at work. Those are two hot topics that we always try to avoid. And there's ways around it. You don't have to get wrapped up. You don't got to get baited. You don't have to engage another person if they want to try to get you to talk about politics and religion. Ethics. You know, somebody could be doing something that's unethical. You know, does that upset you? How do you go about resolving that conflict? Are you the one that's doing something unethical? Is there a difference on who believes where the ethical line lies? And how do you resolve that kind of conflict? And there's lots of other deeply held beliefs on what people do and what people say and what people believe. So we really have to know what kind of conflict there is to help learn how to resolve it. So there's 5 types of conflict resolution. And let me tell you, it when you first hear about this, you're really like, oh yeah, man, if I get in a conflict, there's going to be 5 ways I'm going to be able to get out of that conflict. Just hold on here, because not all conflict resolution types are a proper way to resolve a conflict. But it kind of tells you which ones are healthier than others. So it was quite a good learning experience for myself to learn about this stuff a little more in depth, and know that there's better ways to do things. The number one, or the lowest type of conflict resolution, is avoiding. Avoiding is when people just ignore or withdraw from the conflict, usually when the discomfort of confrontation exceeds the rewards of resolution. No one is contributing anything of value to the conversation or withholding. When conflict is avoided, nothing is resolved. And it always, the bottom left hand picture just explains it perfectly. When I think about avoiding, I think of the person, or was it the ostrich that puts its head in the sand to avoid things? It thinks that hiding its head makes it safe. And this is something we see, you know, there are times to avoid things. Like if someone's trying to bait us into a fight or bait us into a confrontation, we want to try to avoid it. But when the conflict is actually going on, we don't want to just avoid it because it's never going to go away. How can you resolve something if you avoid it? Near impossible. And that's one thing that I try to stress around here is you got to be able to talk about things. Avoiding them just doesn't make them go away, and it could send the wrong signal to the person that's trying to have the conflict. Thanks, Brent. I really don't know what's going on with things today. Competing. Competing is where the people in conflict are playing to win. They are assertive and not cooperative, usually identified by one party assuming they will win and everyone else will lose. It generally means one party does not feel listened to and starts becoming more assertive. Generally, this is where people start raising their voices because they don't feel like they're being listened to. So they figure, if he's not hearing me at a normal tone, I'm going to shout louder. Or I'm not getting what I want out of this thing, so I'm just going to take what I need. You're competing. You're being, there's a good time to be assertive, and there's a bad time. When there's a conflict going on, you really don't want to compete with the other person to try to resolve the conflict, because what you're doing is you're just steamrolling that person. You're not really resolving the issue. You're not listening to the other person. You're just trying to get what you need out of that conflict and move on. So the other person's not getting anything out of it, and you're actually, you're not making a friend at that point. You're making an enemy, and that's going to hurt you in the long run. Accommodating. This is where one person gives in to the wishes or demands of the other person. They are being cooperative but not assertive, and the person is just being gracious, usually done to preserve harmony or avoid disruption. It can lead to unresolved issues. I see a lot of this in people who are too passive when it comes to conflict. They may not like conflict. It may remind them of things that's happened in their past. When you're dealing with mental and behavioral health, you also have to take it from a traumatic or a trauma-informed care aspect. Is yes, that yelling and screaming could trigger something in that individual and could really upset them on a different way. So then they become passive and they're accommodating to what you're demanding from them. Um, so it's the opposite of assertive. It's being passive. The other person's yelling and screaming at you, uh, making demands, and you're just trying to give them everything. That doesn't help you guys meet in the middle. That doesn't help you guys resolve the conflict to where both parties feel more united in the end. And that's what conflict resolution is. It's not about one person winning over the other, like competing. You're If one person wins and the other person loses, you guys both lose because you didn't come at it from an open perspective. You didn't come at it to try to help resolve the conflict. You're creating resentment, You're creating distrust, and you're creating, I hate to say it, but hatred. That other person is really gonna, resent you. That resentment's gonna grow. They're gonna dislike you, and then it's gonna draw into hatred. And sure enough, they're gonna wait, and they're gonna come and they're gonna get you. People hold grudges, and you may not expect it, and they're gonna come and get you. Preserving harmony is great, but how better to preserve harmony than having an open, honest discussion and letting both sides talk to each other respectfully? If you're the person demanding stuff, are you really that selfish to continue expecting this person to give in to your demands? How are you resolving the conflict to where it's not going to happen again? Because chances are that person that you're yelling at, that you have a conflict with, it's going to happen again because their needs aren't being met. So it's really tough. It's a balancing act. That's where we get with compromise. Compromising is defined as when both parties split the difference in conflict. There is a perception that this resolution is fair, but neither person is getting what they wanted and runs the risk of reigniting the conflict all over again. I know religion and politics, but this political cartoon here in the middle bottom kind of explained compromising the best way, better than any words that I could say. They want to come together and meet in the middle. Each person's giving in a little, but who wants to go out on that bridge? Who wants to meet in the middle of that bridge and compromise? Not me, I tell you. Who wants to compromise and split an umbrella? Now they're both getting soaked. And can both people be right in an argument? We've talked about this before, agreeing to disagree. Does that mean both parties are right? No. It just means that you have a difference of opinions. So how can you compromise in a conflict successfully? What happens when you're compromising with another person? You're giving in, right? The other person's giving in too. Yeah, we all want to compromise. We all want to come together. We all have to make sacrifices. We all have to give up things. But we can all get something out of it. But does everybody really get something out of it? No. A lot of times people that compromise in a conflict feel like the things that they gave up didn't matter to the other person. So again, just like the accommodating, you're going to create resentment. There's going to be something that's going to come back up. Granted, it's not as much of a risk as the other ones, but there's still risk involved as well. The best form of conflict resolution is collaborating. Collaboration begins when both parties allow each individual to make a contribution to the discussion, with the possibility of co-creating a shared solution to the conflict that everyone can support. If you're working together, you can actually create new solutions, or you can see that there's value in something that the other person is saying that maybe you haven't thought of before. So that would change the thought process on how to resolve the conflict. It then changes from compromising what your needs are and them compromising what their needs are. But you guys can create a whole new way to come out of it with a solution. Maybe their needs spark in you something that you didn't know that you had a need for. I know recently staff here at WCS took a training course about conflict resolution, and the example that was being used was in regards to the conflict between residents in a neighborhood, whether to keep a park for the kids to play at or whether to turn it into a parking lot for the senior citizens in the neighborhood to have closer parking to their houses. And the two sides of the conflict were the older people felt that their safety was in jeopardy because they were parking farther away and they were more susceptible to crime or just tiring themselves out, because granted, I don't like parking farther away from things because I get tired more easily than I did when I was younger. And if the weather's bad or whatnot, could create potential to get hurt just trying to walk home. Whereas the younger families felt that, the older people, their kids have grown and left the neighborhood, and now they forget that there are younger parents in the neighborhood that have children that still use the playground. So this thing went back and forth. Well, they finally collaborated to find out that, there is a better solution where it could make both parties happy without them actually compromising. It was really neat how they discussed it, and that's something that we try to encourage around here. Yeah, we have so many different walks of life here at WCS that we have to find ways to work through it. We have to find ways to collaborate and work together. I may not always agree with everything that people say to me, and they might, just likewise, they may look at me and think I'm a fruitcake. That's fine. But if we actually take the time to listen to what the other person is saying and think about it, how does that affect what I'm saying, what I'm feeling? And you realize that maybe there's a different way about this that can make us both happy, where neither party feels like they're compromising what their needs are to get it in the end. And you'd be surprised how much good collaborating can actually be and how much growth can come from that type of resolution. Yeah, Joe, I agree. Hate conflict, you got to know your way around it. So you really got to help find ways to get out of it. So resolving conflict, collaboratively. And this was just very enlightening and reaffirming to me that I'm trying to do the best that I can. And I try to spread this along with you guys out there. And I know you miss my words of wisdom. So, step one, you got to identify the problem that's causing the conflict. What is that problem? And then step two, identify the feelings that are associated with this conflict. And it's not just your feelings, but the person you're in conflict with. You want to be able to express how you're feeling about something. And you also have to allow the other person to express how they're feeling about it as well. Get both sets of feelings out there. So then identify what the impact of the problem is to all parties. How is this conflict or this problem or this issue, how does this affect all parties? How did the individual who got upset when somebody went over to help them, how did that impact both parties? Well, the one that got upset, he felt that his peer was trying to take his work and his money away from him. The other one felt he was just trying to be helpful to a friend because he knew that it was almost time to go. So the conflict really, it made them standoffish with each other. It really strained the friendship. That's a big impact of what this problem did to those people. Make the choice of whether or not to resolve the conflict. Remember, it is still your choice. We're all about choices here at Goodwill, and we advocate heavily for all of you guys out there. But it all comes down to your choice. Do you want to resolve this conflict? If you don't, why not? What good is it going to be to sit there and continue to be angry about something? These are things that, we really need to think about. And then work together to resolve the conflict. Work together. It's okay if you need to take a 5-minute break and talk to somebody you trust to help talk out loud your thoughts. That goes back to communication and getting the correct medium on having that conversation. Just because there's a conflict that started doesn't mean you have to address it right there. You can take a minute to gather your thoughts. If you're like me, I can't always think on my feet that fast. Sure, I'm great with a comeback, and that's a benefit of working in this field for a few years, is you develop a pretty good repertoire of ways to come back at people to diffuse situations. Me, I use comedy. I will hit back with a joke or something that's going to de-escalate the situation, because it's going to make this person stop, think, and they're going to start laughing. And they're going to realize maybe it wasn't such a big deal at all. So you got to be able to, take a moment. If you're upset, take a breather, because when you're mad, you are less likely to calmly resolve a conflict. You're just going to escalate it, because you're going to come in aggressive, hot, ready to go. And it could lead to something worse. You could get into a fist flying fight. And that's the last thing we want. I found this one, and it kind of reminded me of something that our counselors have been working on for the last year and a half, and something you guys are probably going to groan when you see. But, we talked about, when conflict comes up, what do? Stop the conflict, or as we say, push the pause button. You can say something. You can be verbal about this. It doesn't have to just be something internal. You can just say, wait, let's talk about this, or hold on a second, I need a moment. You can stop this. It doesn't have to continue, but you can stop it. Do it in a respectful way. Don't go, you can't be talking, no, beep, 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 bitty, beep, beep, blankety blank, because that's just going to make the other person more upset. Do it in a respectful way. Wait, let's talk about this. Or hold on, I need a moment. Identify what feelings you are having. You got to name the problem. And you got to make sure that you express it correctly. Using the I message to say how you feel. I feel sad when you don't let me play because I'm left out. Obviously, I didn't read that one last night. But you don't want to sit there. Does anybody know the difference between I and you statements? I statements are when you are talking about what's going on inside of you, how you are feeling, what you are thinking, what your beliefs are. If you're saying a you statement, then you're being aggressive towards the other person by placing blame on them. You made me feel upset. You hurt my feelings. And I'm going to go back to the matter of who's in charge of your emotions. Each of us are in charge of our own emotions, not the other person. They're going to say stuff. It's how we choose to react to it. That's the difference. So, that hurt my feelings. Or, I'm really sad that was said. Or, I don't understand I don't understand why you were talking to me this way. Yes, I used you in the sentence, but it's not an accusatory sentence. You're just expressing your emotions on not being able to understand why this person is attacking you. And then what are the facts? Or think of solutions. You got to identify the facts. Is this person saying this stuff because they really intend to hurt me, or are they just trying to be funny? Is what they're saying true, or is it not true? That's one thing. It just cracks me up to no end, and I continue saying it till I'm blue in the face. And some of the looks I get are kind of hilarious. Um, but for some reason, people get very upset when someone cracks a joke about their mother, or someone says something mean about their mom, and people will get very defensive. And I understand that there is a good relational aspect to this. I'm not trying to diminish that at all. Nobody likes to hear their mom being called the B word or any other kind of derogatory statement. But my first question is always, is your mom that way? Is your mom a B word? And when they look at me, they're like, no. Then I ask, my follow up question is, then why are you upset over it? So you really have to take a moment and check the facts. Is what that person's saying true? If it's not true, why are you so upset over it? And, maybe it's because I never had a close relationship with my mother, that when people say something bad about my mom, it doesn't affect me. But I think I'm that way with a lot of different people in my family. It's not because I don't love them. It's because I have come to the realization that people are going to say mean things, especially when they're angry and upset, and they're going to lash out to try to say something to hurt you. And I continually remind myself that what they're saying isn't true. What they're saying isn't a fact. So I'm not going to let it upset me. And then the last part of this process is choose an opposite reaction. So I push the pause button. I take it a moment to gather myself. And now I'm identifying the feelings, the emotions that I'm having. And I'm gathering this up. I'm checking the facts. What is this person saying to me? Is it true? Or what are the facts of this incident? What the fact is that my friend came over to help me finish up my pile of clothes because he enjoys my friendship and wanted to do something nice. That's the fact. The fact isn't that he was trying to steal my money or he didn't feel that I couldn't do it. He was just trying to be a helpful friend. And then I want to choose an opposite reaction. I don't want to get angry at what they're saying. I don't want to aggress towards the other person. I don't want to swing on them. I don't want to try to start a fight. And I don't want to escalate the situation. So I'm going to choose an opposite reaction. I'm going to make a choice. You're going to choose a solution. And hopefully you're working with other people and you're making these choices together to come together. And here it is all together, kind of what we had talked about with the 5 conflict styles. Um, the arrow on the left is, concern for substance, assertiveness. And the higher the arrow goes, the higher people are concerned for substance and being right. And then on the bottom is the concern for relationship and cooperation. And the further right you go, the more concerned you are about the relationship. So this kind of goes together. So see where withdraw or avoid, as we talked about avoiding. So you're getting away from the situation, you're avoiding conflict, is you're very, you have no concern for the relationship, you have no concern for the substance of it. Your main concern is just staying out of it all. What if you have a greater concern for substance? You're going to compete because you want to win. But you have less concern for the relationship. So it's going to be a win at all cost. You could be ruining the relationship as you do that. But look at accommodating too. You have a high concern for the relationship and a low concern for substance. Yeah, you're going to have great friendships, but there's no substance to those friendships. It's all going to be one sided because these people, and they're going to learn that you can be taken advantage of because you're going to give in to their wants and desires. Compromise is right there, splitting the difference. You're right in the middle of, substance and relationship. Right there in the middle. But look at collaborate. When you problem solve creatively, so everyone wins. Very high in concern for the relationship, very high in cooperation, but it's also very high for substance and assertiveness. It's the perfect way to resolve conflict. You gotta problem solve it and you gotta be creative with it. You gotta be able to work together to come out as everyone wins. Does everyone win in a compromise? No, because you didn't get everything that you were asking for. But what if what you were asking for wasn't really what you needed? Huh. Now, who would go and do that? Who would ask for stuff that they really didn't need? It's a discussion for another day. So, as we come to the end of part 2 of our conflict resolution, it's really all about communicating. You need to know how to communicate with one another, and you have to work on it. It's not something that's just going to come out overnight. You have to continually refine your skills to communicate properly with other people. You need to work on your body language. You need to work on how you say things. You don't want to take the accusatory you statements. You want to take responsibility for things. I feel this way because you said something. Is kind of in the middle, or my feelings were hurt when you said blah, blah, blah. Okay, you're not accusing that person of hurting your feelings. You're taking ownership that your feelings got hurt because of what was said. You also want to just not fly off the handle when people come and start saying things to you. You got to push that pause button. And as much as they don't like it when I say it, I'll say it to both clients and staff alike. Got to push that pause button. You got to take a step back. You got to identify your emotions. You got to check the facts. And then whatever your natural instinct is, sometimes you may have to choose an opposite reaction. If your natural instinct is to get hot under the collar because somebody said something about your mom and you need to punch them, how is that resolving the conflict? Sure, you're going to feel better for a split second when you hit the person, but now what kind of consequences are you going to face? I think the consequences would have been a lot less had you guys talked about it. And that's the hardest thing to do. But you know what? When you accomplish that, it's going to be so much better. Well, I want to thank you all for your time today and joining us, even though we had our good old-fashioned technical delays. I'm glad I was able to get it running. Please join me tomorrow, hopefully at 10, begging no more technical delays. I think I've got it figured out for now. Tomorrow is our Hump Day Trivia, and we're doing Pittsburgh Steelers sports, or Pittsburgh sports. So, you guys want to brush up on your sports stats for everything Pittsburgh for tomorrow. Thank you all. Good day.